Hey there, Section 14. Hope you guys are all doing well today. The sun just came out in my peat bog on January 12th, 2023, and I'm making my third and last video for you for this week, and I've really only got a couple of topics. I hope your semester kicked off okay. Mine's looking all right. I got some decent classes running, I hope, some reasonable, nice people to work with. And then I got one project after another lined up. Poetry readings, medallion hunt, and on and on and on and on. I admitted to you taking on extra credits, I might have taken on a tinge too much, but I'm happiest when I'm busy because it means I'm helping a lot of people learn and grow up, hopefully. So, a quick editorial comment. I hope you're okay with me dressing a little bit more informally today. I'm a middle-aged guy, and it doesn't work really, but I at least have the idea that if I put on a tie-dye t-shirt and try to bring back the old hippie I once was, that maybe I'll feel a little bit younger, and I kind of do. I still look like heck, especially with my nose, but I do feel a little bit younger. Two topics today to end our week. And they're not complicated. I'd like to talk for a little while about online discussion because you overwhelmingly voted for that. And I'd also like to make some remarks about Martin Luther King, whose legacy we celebrate with Martin Luther King Day, obviously on Monday. So I've got a nice 4-day weekend coming up, and I always like to start class with poetry, but there's a particular way that I'm going to end the class today that has some very little but absolutely crucial poetry embedded in it. And I'll preview that when we get there. So, the majority of you, there were some people that were kind of either way, and generally it was, and not everybody voted, and that's fine, it's a democracy, you can abstain. But most of you wanted to have some kind of online discussion forum so you could talk to one another. And let me have a little discussion with you about discussion. And for my starting point, I want to go back to and talk about two women that I worked with this past fall that had the same issue running, but dealing with it happened in two very different ways, and I'll just cut to it. I had a student, a young woman last year ago, I'm not going to say the name of the class. She let me know in her journal, I'm anxious. I have anxiety. I have anxiety attacks. And I see that all the time, and I've never seen it more than I have in the last 3 years. And I keep writing in the margins, you know what, I get scared too sometimes. I get scared too. And she also let me know, and I think the same sentence or the next one, please don't call on me in class. So as we moved through the semester, it took a while, probably took a month. Quiet class too. Boy, that was one of the quietest ones I've had. I called on her. I said, do you have any opinion about this? She just shook her head. She didn't want to say a word. Well, she really sent me an email that night, didn't she? She was upset, I offended her, which is kind of one of the things I'm making you think about this week, the idea of taking offense, being offended. And she thought I was unprofessional in the doing of that, in calling on her. Well, I can't remember everything I read, right? The brain's job is to forget. And I maybe kind of knew it and maybe kind of didn't. And let's say I knew it. You might be sitting there thinking, well, what a cold-hearted bastard. Well, hold on for a second as I give you example number 2. This past fall, in August actually, as the school year was just beginning, I had another young woman visit me. This time in my office. This wasn't written in a journal. She came to my cozy office in the library. And she let me know that across the pandemic, her unplugged from the world, online learning, etc., really made what was garden variety anxiety so much worse. And I looked at her hands. They were trembling. And I took those hands into my hands and held them. I'm so glad we're not wearing masks this year. And I said, listen, let's do this. Let's do this. You can do this. I'll help you. And she wrote me an email later, and she said, okay, on the first day, can I sit in the very back? Well, the thing is, in E339, I'm a little bit hard of hearing, mild hearing loss, as they say. And I've got plenty of seats. It's a big lecture hall. It's my first act of tyranny is do not sit in the back row. Please come a little bit closer so we make it cozy. I'll be able to hear you better in the back, and I won't have to throw my voice as far. She wanted to sit in the very, very back, and I let her know about the tables. And the reason she said that is, I might need to leave class. Is that okay too? If I have an anxiety attack, can I go outside in the hallway and take a little break, catch my breath? I said to her, don't. Listen to me first. If you have to do that, we'll talk. But that might make it worse because you've got to come back into the room. You've got to re-enter the room. I said, do this on the first day. Just concentrate on listening to the sound of my voice. Just listen to me. Dispel every other thought. And I'll try to teach so well that you get a little bit distracted from being anxious. And I told her the truth. I get scared once in a while too. Something big is happening in the world. I don't pretend to understand it. Well, what's great is that she got through that first class. She looked at that door a couple of times, but she didn't go. And she made it. And as the semester went on, she moved up in the rows. She moved up 2 rows and sat with a row full of very gentle women to join them and join us. I told her, we need you. We need your help. I'm looking to see something I'm looking for an audio-visual aid. It's not important. ADHD. No, was she a great participant in the class? A great discussant? No, she was pretty quiet. But as the semester went on, I said, hey, how would you feel about working in a group with 2 or 3 other people? She thought she could do that. And we did that more than once that semester, and she did just great. I'm not saying that the second effort of a student trying to conquer their anxiety and being afraid of speaking up in the world, that makes her a better student or a greater student or a better person, etc. But that first student that I talked about is going to find, she's very young, she's in the act of becoming, but she's going to find out that the world needs her. And maybe she'll find some kind of workspace where she has a job where she never has to use her voice, where she never has to answer anyone's questions or enter into a conversation with other people. I think the odds of that are unlikely, and hopefully as that young woman grows up, awfully young, I don't even think she was 17, she will take courage. Now, I don't know what your situation is. I haven't even started in on your journals yet, and it's kind of nice to see them spelling it already. But it's very possible that not only are you going to be having discussions in this class, because we voted for it, it's possible that you're taking, realize, face-to-face classes too, because I have a number of students that are doing both. My friend group that sits front and center on my humanities classroom, they're my co-pilots. Some of them have taken 3 or 4 classes from me, so I know them really well. I know that they're, for instance, taking me live and Dr. Corey, our new historian, online. I know some people are taking a face-to-face class with Sarah Kath and taking her online philosophy classes. So maybe you're mixing it up. Maybe you're going back and forth. And maybe I'll take a shot at trying to say something that would just cover both, right? And I'm going to try to do it with just one idea. That's impossible. I need more ideas than one. Think of it this way. If you pick up a rock, if you go outside and pick up a rock, scientifically, you can, smack the rock open and maybe learn things about the rock. You'll decide eventually, well, this is basalt or this is limestone. But you can know a few things about the rock just with the help of science. You can take a plant. Let's move up the food chain a little bit. You can take a milkweed plant or anything from the ecosystems that you live in, and you can take that plant and put it under a microscope and maybe cut it open and study the plant as a living thing. If we move up the line to animals, isn't that mysterious? I'm so excited. My older boy Jeffy's coming this weekend with my favorite dog, and I'm going to show you a picture of that dog. I think I've already talked about it. I'm kind of obsessed with this dog, Wilbur the Wonder Dog. He's a French bulldog. I can't believe how much money my son spent on that dog with his new wife. I also cannot believe how that dog is worth every dollar. I love this dog, Wilbur. I swear it can think. I taught it to wink in 5 minutes with treats. That freaked out my daughter-in-law. I swear that dog is conscious and sentient, and it may just be staring at me with its heavy-lidded eyes just because it wants a treat, right? Do animals think? I have no idea. Let's hope. I know horses and dolphins and elephants are pretty smart, and I know that Wilbur. I think he thinks of me as Grandpa. Where are my grandchildren? Neither. I mean, put an order in on that. They haven't walked into this room yet. I hope they come along. Now, when we get to all the way up to the food chain, to a human being, if you watched a human being walking around the college, I don't want to be creepy, but let's say you pick out someone to study, and if you see them getting tacos in the cafeteria at CLC, you could assume they must like tacos. If you saw that person later sitting in the sun, reading a book, looking out on the South Lawn. I love all that glass at our college. It's really pretty. If you haven't come, you should. You could then deduce and infer, okay, that person likes to sit and read in the sun. But it isn't until that person talks to you, turns to you, and speaks that they begin to reveal things about themselves, things that are in their head and in their heart. And this is how I'm going to put this to my live classes tomorrow. If you come to class and if you don't speak up, if you don't reveal who and what you are, we're not going to get to know you very well. You cannot really get to know and appreciate someone until you enter into a conversation with them dialectically. And this is one of the hardest things that I do at the college. It's so hard. There's blasé detachment. There's fear. Everyone's afraid of being wrong all the time. When being wrong, making mistakes is exactly how you learn. There's no other way. But particularly at the college, we do have a little detachment, and we do have people that are nervous. Some of that is about PSEO kids colliding from different high schools. I don't know if there's rivalries going on, but I can tell you that'll be very. There's no other place I'd want to be than CLC. But to give you a second example, when I drive up to Staples next Tuesday to teach that live Comp 1, when I get these two classes synced and lined up together, I know that it's going to be easier to get a conversation going. The room's going to bubble because those kids have been going to school forever, mostly, right? A kid or two moved to town probably, but some of those kids I know Tuesday have known each other since first or second grade. They know each other well. They know each other's stories. They've already had all the possible successes and mistakes you can possibly have. So I tell you, teaching high school English, walking into any high school English class for me is easier than teaching at CLC. It takes me sometimes an entire semester to break a class in. Although I was so happy yesterday with both my 9 and my 11 o'clock class. Even my 9 o'clock is pretty quiet so far. With both my classes, day 2, by the time I hit my teaching table, I looked up. I only saw 1 or 2 people on their phones. Now, my humanites are different because they all know each other from they're like serial takers of my classes. But I'm really encouraged. Usually on the first day, everyone's looking at their phone. And eventually the phones disappear because we have to turn and enjoy each other's company, living in vivid companionship with each other. So whether it's a live class or an online class, as gently as I can, I want to proclaim that silence is irresponsible. It is. You got to speak up. Be brave. Be courageous. And you'll learn more if you're more engaged. So I'm going to put up some discussion rules, expectations that I got from Leanne Flynn, who I've already talked about in this class. And let's talk. Let's get to know each other one way or another. And talk with each other with the questions that I put before you in the next 16 weeks. Item 2, topic number 2. We solemnly observe the assassination. No, he was shot in April. For some reason, Martin Luther King Day is in January. And let's honor that man. Think about that guy a little bit that day. Was he a perfect man? No. The perfect civil rights leader is one that can never be found. There was a greatness in him that's hard to even sing of properly. He had some appetites too that I don't really feel like talking about right now. Probably wasn't true to his wife more than once. There's like FBI evidence of that. He still is one of the greatest Americans that have ever lived, and he knew how important peaceful protests are. So here's what I want to put before you as a kind of eulogy to him. The year 1968 was a bad year. I think this is the apocalypse, but we've had other difficult eras too. In 1968, we had the sexual revolution, which at your hearing I'm going to proclaim to be a bad idea. And if you're offended by that, you're offended. That is, we're still suffering the catastrophic results of that. Just when we talk about sexually transmitted diseases, STDs, right there. I'm not going to talk any more about that right now. We had a sexual revolution going on. We had a war going on in Vietnam. The Tet Offensive had been launched. Our boys were over there dying in Southeast Asia. We had political troubles. We had riots in Watts, Los Angeles. We had violent protests as well as peaceful. And we had a pandemic going on in 1968. I survived it. We didn't wear masks. We were still going to Twins games with my grandpa. And it killed a little girl that sat in front of me, Trudy Schoonover. And Sue Youngquist died in that pandemic too. I got the Hong Kong flu when I was 8 years old that year. I was sick for 3-4 days. I got a toy and a sick. I got a toy and a sick toy and a little cloth over my head to cool me down in the fever. And we had 2 absolutely dramatic assassinations that year. Martin Luther King was assassinated in April, talked himself to death, and he knew it was coming too. And then later, that summer, Bobby Kennedy, the younger brother of John F. Kennedy, Kennedy's the only royalty we've ever really had, he was shot and killed in a Chicago hotel. And this is what I want to put before you. Let's take a look at a little bit of history. We can't ignore history. We have to turn and we have to look at it. And one's going to go a little longer. And if you don't want to watch the video, well, I'm not going to be quizzing you on it. But let's give you a little bit of setup. When Martin Luther King was shot, Bobby Kennedy was slated to give a speech in Indianapolis. And in those days, we didn't have the internet, right? And he was going to give the speech in I think a largely black neighborhood. And everybody's like, all of his dudes are like, wait a minute, this is dangerous. We're not going to have enough police there. And it's not good. He said, I'm going anyway. And I guess he wrote a speech, and if I got the story correct, he left it in his car. And then this man of genius, also not a perfect guy, but still a great guy, he gets up in front of this crowd, tosses the speech, and as a rhetorician, as a classically trained rhetorician, he improvises his speech out of thin air. Anything could have happened. And study it. Please study it. And please study the genius of this man. Twice in the speech, and this is really what carried the day, he wins the hearts of the crowd over with poetry. He quotes Aeschylus, who I adore, not once, but twice. And the crowd turns toward him. Yes, heartbroken because of the death of Martin Luther King, but also joyful and hopeful because life goes on, the world begins again. I'm so proud of him. His epilogue, he doesn't know that he's got 10 minutes to live. A few months later, I believe July in Chicago, here's a story. Bobby Kennedy was there for some kind of a convention, and Bobby Kennedy had room service. A young man from Mexico, I think his name was Juan Romero, brought him up his dinner. And Bobby Kennedy liked this young man. He wanted to talk to him. And Juan stayed. He was a kid. And later that night, Bobby Kennedy went all the way down to took the elevator all the way down to that restaurant because he wanted to talk to Juan Romero some more. The next day, Bobby Kennedy is shot in the gut, I think more than once. Absolute chaos ensues, and the thing is, Juan Romero, that kitchen guy, that cook, he was there. He was right next to Bobby Kennedy when he took those bullets, and he leaned down there with him, and they were both Roman Catholics, and Juan knew that. and one took a rosary out of his pocket and put it in Bobby Kennedy's bloody hand as he was breathing his last breaths. And the last thing, one of the last things Bobby Kennedy said, and he said it to Juan, who he had become friends with the night before. He said, "Was anybody hurt?" And the answer was yes. Let's check this out. This is back when history was happening. Bless you all. See you next week.
Do they know about Martin Luther King?
We have left it up to you to let it can be handled.
Could you lower those signs, please? I have some very sad news for all of you, and that is that Martin Luther King was shot and was killed tonight in Memphis. Martin Luther King dedicated his life to love and to justice between fellow human beings. He died in the cause of that effort. In this difficult day, in this difficult time for the United States, it's perhaps well to ask what kind of a nation we are and what direction we want to move in. For those of you who are black, considering the evidence evidently is that there were white people who were responsible, you can be filled with bitterness and with hatred and a desire for revenge. We can move in that direction as a country, in greater polarization, black people amongst blacks and white amongst whites, filled with hatred toward one another. Or we can make an effort, as Martin Luther King did, to understand and to comprehend and replace that violence, that stain of bloodshed that is spread across our land, with an effort to understand compassion and love. For those of you who are black and are tempted to be filled with hatred and mistrust of the injustice of such an act against all white people, I would only say that I can also feel in my own heart the same kind of feeling. I had a member of my family killed, but he was killed by a white man. But we have to make an effort in the United States. We have to make an effort to understand, to get beyond or go beyond these rather difficult times. My favorite poem, my favorite poet was Aeschylus. And he once wrote, "Even in our sleep, pain which cannot forget falls drop by drop upon the heart, until in our own despair, against our will, comes wisdom through the awful grace of God." What we need in the United States is not division. What we need in the United States is not hatred. What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or whether they be black. We can do well in this country. We will have difficult times. We've had difficult times in the past, but we will have difficult times in the future. It is not the end of violence. It is not the end of lawlessness, and it's not the end of disorder. But the vast majority of white people and the vast majority of black people in this country want to live together, want to improve the quality of our life, and want justice for all human beings that abide in our land. and what dedicate ourselves to what the Greeks wrote so many years ago, to tame the savageness of man and make gentle the life of this world. Let us dedicate ourselves to that and say a prayer for our country and for our people. Thank you very much.